In the foggy streets of Victorian London, where gas lamps flickered like wary eyes against the encroaching night, young Eleanor Harrington stood before the grand mirror in her family's modest drawing room, her white wedding gown cascading around her like a shroud of innocence, though her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and unspoken dread that she could not quite name, for today was the day she would marry Lord Reginald Ashford, a man whose piercing blue eyes and enigmatic smile had captivated her during their brief courtship at the summer balls, yet whispers in the society parlors hinted at shadows in his family's past, tales of vanished brides and cursed estates that no one dared speak aloud. But Eleanor pushed such thoughts away, focusing instead on the delicate lace veil her mother adjusted with trembling hands, reminding her that this union would elevate their family's status from mere merchants to nobility. A dream her late father had always cherished before his untimely death in a carriage accident that some said was no accident at all, and as the church bells tolled in the distance, summoning her to St. Mary's Cathedral, Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine, as if the very air carried a warning from the ghosts of weddings past, but she smiled bravely, stepping into the carriage that would carry her toward her fate, unaware that the dark secrets of Victorian wedding nights were about to unfold in ways she could never imagine, for Lord Ashford's ancestral home, Blackthorn Manor, perched on the misty moors outside the city, held more than just opulent ballrooms and gilded halls. It harbored hidden chambers where rituals from a bygone era were said to take place under the cover of matrimonial bliss, rituals that bound souls in eternal pacts sealed with blood and desire. And as the horses clopped along the cobblestone roads, Eleanor recalled the strange letter she had received anonymously just days before, its ink smudged as if written in haste, warning her to flee before the vows were spoken, but she had dismissed it as a jealous rival's prank, though now, with the cathedral's spires looming ahead, doubt crept in like fog through cracked windows, making her wonder about the peculiar customs her fiancé had mentioned in passing, customs unique to his lineage that involved a midnight ceremony after the wedding feast. Something about honoring the ancestors with a shared chalice and whispered oaths in the dim light of candles made from rare tallow, and Eleanor's mind raced with questions she dared not ask, for in this era of strict propriety, a bride was expected to submit without inquiry, her virtue a gift to be unwrapped in the bridal chamber where secrets might lurk behind heavy velvet curtains, perhaps even portraits of former Lady Ashfords whose eyes followed you with silent pleas. And as she alighted from the carriage, the crowd of well-wishers parted like a sea, their faces a blur of smiles and envy, but one elderly woman in black mourning attire caught her eye, muttering under her breath about the curse of the wedding night, before vanishing into the throng, leaving Eleanor to walk the aisle alone, her arm linked with her uncle's, the organ music swelling like a heartbeat too loud. And there at the altar stood Lord Reginald, tall and handsome in his tailored suit, his expression one of triumphant possession that sent another shiver through her, for in his gaze she glimpsed something primal, a hunger that went beyond mere affection, hinting at the mysteries that awaited in the privacy of their union, where Victorian society turned a blind eye to the private torments of the elite. And as the vicar began the ceremony, intoning words of eternal bond and obedience, Eleanor's thoughts drifted to the stories her governess had once shared in hushed tones. Tales of brides who entered their wedding nights full of hope only to emerge changed, their spirits dimmed by revelations too dark to utter, perhaps involving forbidden knowledge passed down through generations, like alchemical formulas for elixirs that heightened senses or induced visions of the afterlife, all under the guise of consummating the marriage. And she wondered if Reginald's family crest, a thorny rose entwined with a serpent, symbolized more than just heritage. It might represent the poison hidden in beauty, the danger in desire. And as she repeated her vows, her voice steady despite the turmoil within, a sudden gust of wind rattled the stained glass windows, casting eerie shadows that danced like specters across the pews, making the congregation murmur, some crossing themselves as if warding off evil. But Reginald merely smiled, his hand warm yet firm on hers as he slipped the gold band onto her finger, sealing their fates. And the kiss that followed was chaste for the audience but promised depths of passion later. A passion that might unravel the threads of her sanity if the rumors held truth, for Blackthorn Manor was not just a home but a labyrinth of secrets, with secret passages rumored to lead to underground vaults where ancient tomes detailed the dark arts practiced by Reginald's forebears, arts that involved the wedding night as a gateway to power, perhaps sacrificing a bride's innocence not just physically but spiritually, binding her to eternal servitude or worse, and as the newlyweds emerged into the daylight, rice showering them like blessings from above, Eleanor felt the weight of her new title, Lady Ashford, but also the invisible chains that came with it, the carriage ride to the manor stretching into hours as the city gave way to rolling hills and then desolate moors, where the wind howled like lost souls, and Reginald spoke little, his eyes fixed on the horizon, occasionally glancing at her with that same enigmatic smile, making her heart flutter with both love and fear. For she had heard whispers of his previous engagement, to a Miss Victoria Langford, who had disappeared on the eve of their wedding, her body never found, though some said she had fled after discovering the family's dark secret, a secret involving a ritual that required the bride to partake in a forbidden act under the full moon, an act that blurred the lines between ecstasy and horror, and as the manor came into view, its towers piercing the sky like accusatory fingers, Eleanor steeled herself for the wedding feast that awaited, a lavish affair with guests from high society, all toasting to their happiness while perhaps knowing more than they let on, for in Victorian times scandals were buried deep, especially those of the nobility, and the night would culminate in the bridal chamber, where candles would flicker, casting long shadows, and Reginald would reveal the first layer of the mystery, perhaps starting with a locked box containing heirlooms that held clues to the past, or a diary from his great-grandmother detailing her own wedding night terrors that involved visions induced by a special tea brewed from rare herbs, leading to revelations of betrayal and murder within the family line, and Eleanor, naive yet curious, would sip from the cup offered, her world tilting as the effects took hold, blurring reality with hallucination, where ghosts of past brides appeared, whispering warnings of escape before it was too late, but for now. As they entered the grand hall adorned with flowers and crystal, the orchestra playing waltzes, she danced in her husband's arms, the room spinning with laughter and champagne, yet beneath it all, a undercurrent of suspense built, for the clock ticked toward midnight, the hour when the true wedding night began, away from prying eyes, in the seclusion of the master bedroom with its four-poster bed draped in silk, and there, Reginald would lock the door, his demeanor shifting from charming groom to something more intense, his voice low as he began to explain the tradition, a tradition that dated back to the Regency era but evolved in darkness during Queen Victoria's reign, when moral facades hid depraved pursuits, and Eleanor's pulse quickened, anticipating the touch that would ignite both pleasure and peril, for the dark secrets were not just stories, they were living legacies, waiting to claim another soul, and as the guests departed, leaving the manor silent save for the creak of old floors, she followed him up the winding staircase, each step echoing like a countdown to discovery, the air growing thicker with the scent of lavender and something metallic, perhaps blood from rituals long past, and in the chamber, lit only by firelight, Reginald turned to her, his eyes gleaming, and said, "My dear, the real ceremony begins now," his words hanging in the air like a promise of mystery yet to unfold, but what he revealed next would shatter her illusions, drawing her into a web of suspense that spanned centuries, where wedding nights were not endings but beginnings of eternal enigmas. And Eleanor, with a mix of trepidation and intrigue, stepped closer, ready to uncover the first secret, unaware that 19 more layers awaited in the shadows of Blackthorn Manor, each more chilling than the last, building toward a climax that could either free her or bind her forever in the grip of Victorian darkness, for in this era of corsets and courtesy, the true horrors lurked not in graveyards but in the sanctity of marriage beds, where desires twisted into nightmares, and as the fire crackled, casting grotesque shapes on the walls, Reginald opened a hidden compartment in the bedpost, retrieving a small, ornate key that gleamed ominously, whispering that it unlocked not just a door but the gateway to their family's cursed history. A history riddled with missing women, unexplained fortunes, and pacts with forces beyond the mortal realm, forces that demanded tribute on wedding nights through acts that tested the boundaries of love and loyalty, and Eleanor's breath caught as he led her to a concealed panel in the wall, sliding it open to reveal a narrow passageway lit by flickering torches, the air cool and damp like a tomb, and they descended into the depths, her gown trailing behind like a ghost train, the sounds of the manor fading above, replaced by distant drips of water and echoes of footsteps that might not be their own, suggesting they were not alone, perhaps watched by spectral guardians of the secret. And at the end of the passage lay a chamber adorned with ancient tapestries depicting bridal scenes that grew progressively darker, from joyful unions to figures writhing in agony. And in the center stood an altar with a chalice engraved with serpents, filled with a crimson liquid that swirled as if alive. And Reginald explained that every Ashford bride must drink to prove her worthiness, to see visions of the past and future, visions that revealed betrayals and hidden treasures, but also drove some mad, like his aunt who had been institutionalized after her wedding night, babbling about demons in the mirrors, and Eleanor, her curiosity overriding fear, lifted the chalice to her lips, the liquid bitter and warm, coursing through her like fire, and suddenly the room spun, images flashing before her eyes, brides from decades ago, their screams silent yet piercing, husbands with faces contorted in ecstasy and evil, rituals involving knives and oaths sworn in blood, binding souls to eternal youth at the cost of innocence. And as the vision intensified, she saw Reginald's true intent, not love but legacy, using her to continue the line and feed the curse that granted his family power and wealth. A curse born from a pact with a shadowy figure in the 18th century, and panic rose in her chest. But the effects held her frozen, her mind racing to find escape, yet the hook of mystery pulled her deeper, for among the horrors she glimpsed a way to break the cycle, a hidden artifact that could end the dark secrets once and for all, if only she survived the night. And as the vision faded, she collapsed into Reginald's arms, his laughter echoing softly, saying, "Welcome to the family, my love, the secrets are yours now," leaving her to wonder what terrors the remaining hours would bring her. Wedding night transforming from dream to nightmare, suspense building with every heartbeat, in this Victorian tale of shadows and seduction, where nothing was as it seemed, and the true darkness lay not in the moors outside but within the hearts of those bound by matrimony's veil. And as she regained her senses, the chamber's walls seemed to close in, whispering names of lost brides, urging her to fight or flee. But Reginald's grip tightened, leading her back up the stairs, promising more revelations at dawn, though dawn felt an eternity away, trapped in the web of history's mysteries, her story just beginning to unfold in parts that would reveal layer upon layer of intrigue, each more captivating than the last, drawing her, and the reader, into the abyss of Victorian enigma, where wedding nights held the key to both salvation and damnation, and Eleanor's journey through the 20 parts would test her resolve, uncovering allies in unexpected places, like the loyal maid who knew the manor secrets, or the detective from London investigating the disappearances. But for now, in Part 1, the hook was set, the suspense palpable, the mystery alive. As the clock struck 1, and Reginald extinguished the last candle, plunging them into darkness where touches became explorations, whispers became confessions, and the dark secrets began to stir, waiting to consume or empower. In a tale that promised twists at every turn, historical accuracy blended with fictional thrill, all in simple words that painted vivid pictures of an era long gone but eternally haunting, with Eleanor's fate hanging by a thread of lace and legacy, her wedding night the gateway to a suspenseful odyssey that would span generations and genres, mixing romance with horror, mystery with history, until the final part resolved the enigma or deepened it forever. But that was far ahead, for now the night pressed on, full of promise and peril, in the heart of Blackthorn Manor, where the ancient stones seemed to pulse with the echoes of forgotten screams and the air hung heavy with the scent of aged wood and lingering incense from rituals long concealed. Eleanor awoke from her vision-induced stupor, her body sprawled on the cold flagstone floor of the hidden chamber, the chalice still clutched in her trembling hand, its crimson residue staining her lips like a mark of initiation into a world she never sought. And as her eyes fluttered open, the flickering torchlight revealed Reginald standing over her, his face a mask of concern mingled with something darker, a calculating gleam that suggested he had anticipated her reaction to the potent elixir. For this was no ordinary wedding night tonic but a brew passed down through the Ashford line, distilled from herbs harvested under specific lunar phases and infused with essences that unlocked the mind's barriers to the supernatural, allowing brides to glimpse the family's cursed tapestry of power and peril, a tapestry woven with threads of ambition, betrayal, and unholy alliances that dated back to the time when Reginald's great-great-grandfather, Sir Edmund Ashford, a notorious occultist during the Georgian era, had struck a deal with a mysterious wanderer from the East, trading his firstborn soul for eternal prosperity, a deal that manifested in subsequent generations as a compulsion to reenact binding ceremonies on wedding nights, ensuring the curse's continuity through matrimonial bloodlines. And now Eleanor, still dizzy, from the visions of writhing figures and shadowy packs, pushed herself up, her wedding gown now smudged with dust from the chamber's floor, questioning Reginald with a voice barely above a whisper about what she had seen, the images of past brides fading into madness or vanishing without trace, their essences absorbed to fuel the manor's unnatural vitality. For Blackthorn was no mere estate but a living entity, its walls fed by the life force of those who married into its grasp, and Reginald, kneeling beside her with feigned tenderness, explained in hushed tones that the visions were a test, a way to prove her strength and loyalty, for only the worthy could bear the secrets without crumbling, and those who failed, like poor Victoria Langford, were deemed unfit and released into the moors, their disappearances attributed to tragic accidents or elopements, though in truth, the moors concealed hidden bogs where bodies could sink forever. Guarded by will-o'-the-wisps that locals swore were the restless spirits of discarded brides, luring the curious to similar fates, and as he helped her to her feet, leading her back through the winding passageway with its damp walls etched faintly with arcane symbols that glowed faintly in the torchlight, Eleanor felt a surge of determination amidst her fear, for in the visions she had spotted a glimmer of hope, an ancient amulet mentioned in the spectral whispers, an artifact hidden somewhere in the manor that could sever the curse if wielded by a bride with pure intent, breaking the cycle of dark wedding nights that had plagued the Ashfords for over a century, during which time no less than 7 brides had met mysterious ends, their portraits in the gallery hall depicting women with hauntingly similar features to her own, wide eyes filled with unspoken terror, and back in the bridal chamber, as Reginald locked the secret panel behind them. The room now bathed in the soft glow of dawn's first light filtering through heavy drapes. He suggested they rest, but Eleanor's mind raced, plotting how to search for the amulet without arousing suspicion, perhaps enlisting the help of the housemaid, Agnes, a stoic woman in her 50s who had served the family for decades and whose knowing glances during the feast hinted at unspoken knowledge of the manor's horrors, for Agnes had once confided in a moment of weakness about strange noises in the night, cries from the cellars that sounded like women pleading for release, and Eleanor resolved to seek her out at the earliest opportunity, but for now, Reginald drew her toward the four-poster bed, his hands gentle yet insistent, whispering promises of passion that masked the underlying ritual, for the consummation was the next phase, a union not just of bodies but of souls, where during the act, incantations would be murmured to invoke the curse's protection, ensuring heirs who would perpetuate the legacy. And as he began to unlace her gown with skilled fingers, the fabric whispering as it fell away, exposing her to the chill air and his fervent gaze, Eleanor feigned submission, her thoughts elsewhere, recalling fragments from the visions, a library hidden behind a false bookshelf in the study, where dusty tomes detailed the amulet's location, perhaps in the crypt beneath the family chapel, a place forbidden to all but the lord of the manor. And she wondered if she could slip away during the day while Reginald attended to estate matters, but the manor's layout was a maze, with corridors that twisted illogically, doors that led to dead ends or unexpected drops. Designed perhaps by Sir Edmund himself to confound intruders and trap the unwary, and as their bodies entwined on the silk sheets, the bed creaking under their weight, Eleanor's senses heightened by the lingering effects of the elixir, every touch electric, blending pleasure with the undercurrent of dread, for in the throes of intimacy, she heard whispers in her mind, voices of past brides urging her to resist, to find the amulet before the full binding at midnight's next toll, when the curse would seal permanently, dooming her to a life of shadowed existence, her vitality siphoned to maintain the family's unnatural longevity, as evidenced by Reginald's youthful appearance despite rumors of him being older than he claimed, perhaps sustained by the essences of previous unions, and as dawn fully broke, casting golden rays that did little to warm the room's oppressive atmosphere, Reginald drifted into sleep, his arm possessively around her, but Eleanor lay awake, her heart pounding with resolve, slipping quietly from the bed once his breathing steadied, donning a robe and creeping into the hallway, the floorboards groaning softly underfoot like reluctant accomplices, and she made her way to the servants' quarters, where Agnes was already stirring, preparing for the day's chores, her lined face registering surprise at the new lady's appearance so early, but Eleanor, with urgent whispers, confided a fraction of her visions, enough to earn Agnes's wary trust, for the maid revealed she had suspected the dark goings-on for years, having found blood-stained linens and heard incantations echoing from the chambers, and she agreed to help, disclosing a secret map sketched by a former butler, hidden in the kitchen pantry, detailing the manor's hidden passages and the crypt's entrance, accessible via a trapdoor in the chapel's altar, but warned that guardians lurked there, not human, but ethereal watchers bound by the curse to protect the secrets, manifesting as cold drafts or illusions that could drive one mad. And armed with this knowledge, Eleanor returned to the chamber just as Reginald stirred, feigning a headache from the night's excitement to excuse her pallor, and as the day unfolded with mundane marital duties, greeting lingering guests, overseeing the unpacking of wedding gifts that included peculiar items like a silver dagger engraved with runes and a crystal orb that seemed to swirl with inner mists, she plotted her descent into the crypt that evening, when Reginald would be occupied with his ledgers in the study. But suspense mounted as odd occurrences plagued the manor, mirrors fogging without cause, showing fleeting images of veiled women, clocks stopping at midnight's hour despite being wound, and a raven tapping insistently at the window, its beady eyes fixed on Eleanor as if delivering a omen, perhaps sent by the curse itself to deter her. And by afternoon, a visitor arrived unannounced, Inspector Harlan Graves from Scotland Yard, a stern man with a mustache like iron bristles, inquiring about Victoria Langford's disappearance, claiming new evidence suggested foul play linked to Blackthorn, but Reginald dismissed him smoothly, citing old rumors, though Eleanor overheard their tense exchange from behind a door, Graves mentioning a witness who saw Victoria fleeing the moors on her would-be wedding night, pursued by shadowy figures. And this fueled Eleanor's urgency, for if she could find the amulet and break the curse, perhaps she could expose the truths and save herself. But as evening fell, the manor cloaked in twilight's purple haze, Reginald insisted on a private dinner in the dining hall, candlelit with dishes of roasted pheasant and vintage wines that tasted faintly of the elixir's bitterness, his conversation turning to family history, regaling her with tales of ancestors' conquests, subtly weaving in hints of the occult practices that secured their fortunes, like divining hidden gold veins or influencing court decisions through unseen means. And Eleanor nodded attentively, her mind mapping the route to the chapel, slipping a small lantern into her pocket during a moment alone. And when Reginald retired to his study, pipe in hand, she seized the chance, navigating the dim corridors with Agnes's map clutched tightly, her footsteps muffled by Persian rugs that depicted scenes of mythical hunts, symbols perhaps of the family's predatory legacy. And reaching the chapel, a small Gothic structure annexed to the manor, its stained glass windows depicting saints with faces twisted in agony rather than serenity, she approached the altar, feeling for the hidden latch as described, and with a click, the trapdoor swung open, revealing steep stone steps descending into musty darkness, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. And as she descended, lantern held high, shadows danced like living entities, whispering her name in sibilant tones that raised goose flesh on her arms. And at the bottom lay the crypt, a vaulted chamber lined with sarcophagi bearing Ashford names, their lids carved with thorny roses and serpents, and in the center, a pedestal held what appeared to be the amulet, a ornate pendant of black onyx set with a blood-red ruby that pulsed faintly, as if breathing. But as she reached for it, a chill wind extinguished her lantern, plunging the crypt into blackness. And visions assaulted her anew, this time without the elixir, spectral brides materializing, their translucent forms circling her, recounting their tales of deception. One, Lady Beatrice from 1820, tricked into the ritual and drained of life to cure her husband's ailment. Another, Constance in 1845, who discovered the pack's demonic origins and tried to flee, only to be hunted down, and they warned that touching the amulet required a counterspell, inscribed on a scroll hidden in Sir Edmund's tomb. For without it, the artifact would amplify the curse, binding her tighter, and panic surged as footsteps echoed from above, Reginald's voice calling her name with feigned worry, having perhaps discovered her absence, and Eleanor fumbled in the dark, prying open the nearest sarcophagus with desperate strength, bones rattling as she searched for the scroll, her fingers brushing parchment yellowed with age, and unrolling it by feel, she memorized the Latin words, Libera anima mea vinculus tenebrarum, repeating them as she grasped the amulet, a surge of energy coursing through her like lightning, illuminating the crypt in ethereal light, revealing Reginald at the stairs, his face contorted in rage, shouting that she had meddled in forces beyond her ken, lunging toward her with the silver dagger from the gifts, intent on silencing her before the counterspell took hold, and in that moment of confrontation, the spectral brides rallied, their forms solidifying to bar his path. Buying her time to chant the words fully, the amulet glowing brighter cracks appearing in the crypt's walls as the curse began to fracture, tremors shaking the manor above, guests' remnants scattering in confusion, and Reginald howled in denial, his body aging rapidly before her eyes, wrinkles etching deep as the stolen vitality ebbed away. But the amulet's power was double-edged, pulling Eleanor into a vortex of memories not her own, flooding her with the pain of all past brides, threatening to overwhelm her sanity, and she realized the true hook of the mystery. Breaking the curse required not just the artifact but a sacrifice of her own, perhaps her love or her freedom, for the pacts demanded balance, and as the chamber collapsed around them, stones tumbling like judgments from above, she clutched the amulet tighter, whispering the final incantation, the light exploding in a blinding flash that transported her mind to another realm, a limbo where the curse's originator, the Eastern Wanderer, appeared as a hooded figure, offering a bargain to end it all. But at what cost? Leaving her suspended in suspense as the physical world reformed, Reginald crumpled on the ground, the manor stabilizing, but new shadows stirring, hinting that the dark secrets of Victorian wedding nights were far from vanquished, merely evolving into fresh mysteries that would unfold in subsequent parts, with allies like Inspector Graves returning, hidden diaries surfacing, and perhaps descendants from lost brides seeking revenge, all building toward a grand revelation. Across the 20 chapters, each layer peeling back more intrigue in this historical tapestry of suspense and seduction, where Eleanor's courage would be tested anew, her wedding night extending into a lifelong quest against the remnants of darkness that clung to Blackthorn like ivy, poisonous and persistent, and as she emerged from the crypt, amulet in hand, the dawn of a new day breaking over the moors. She knew the battle had only just begun, with secrets yet to whisper their full tales in the echoing halls of the manor, drawing her deeper into the enigma that promised thrills, twists, and terrors in equal measure, for in Victorian England, where propriety masked profundity, the true horrors were those woven into the fabric of legacy and love, and Eleanor's story, now intertwined with the spectral chorus, marched onward into uncertainty. Her resolve the only light against the encroaching gloom that threatened to swallow her whole, but with the amulet's hum in her palm, she stepped into the light, ready for whatever shadows the next night would cast, in this ongoing saga of mystery and matrimony, where every revelation birthed a dozen more questions, hooking the soul like thorns in flesh, unyielding and unforgettable, as the wind through the moors carried faint cries, perhaps of freedom or foreboding, echoing eternally in the heart of Blackthorn Manor and beyond, into the vast expanse of historical shadows that awaited exploration in the parts to come, each more elaborate and enthralling than the last, building suspense like a storm-gathering force, with Eleanor's fate as the eye of the whirlwind, calm yet charged with potential catastrophe. And so the tale continued, layer upon layer, secret upon secret, in simple words that evoke the grandeur of an era steeped in enigma, where wedding nights were portals to the profound, and one woman's curiosity could unravel empires of darkness or forge new chains in their place, the choice hers amid the mounting intrigue that defined her newfound existence as Lady Ashford, guardian of secrets, or their ultimate destroyer. Time alone would tell as the clock ticked onward, inexorably toward midnight once more. The grandfather clock in Blackthorn Manor's grand foyer chimed with a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the ancient estate, its tolling notes like harbingers of impending revelations that Eleanor now dreaded yet craved in equal measure. For with the amulet secured around her neck, its ruby core throbbing faintly against her skin like a second heartbeat, she felt empowered yet burdened, as if the weight of centuries pressed upon her shoulders, and as she ascended from the crypt's crumbling depths, dust clinging to her disheveled robe and her mind swirling with the residual echoes of the spectral bride's pleas, she emerged into the chapel where moonlight filtered through the twisted saintly windows, casting elongated shadows that twisted like accusatory fingers pointing toward her newfound role as both victim and potential vanquisher of the Ashford curse. But Reginald, though weakened and aged by the amulet's initial surge, was not defeated. His form slumped against the altar, yet his eyes burning with a feral intensity, as he rasped accusations of betrayal, claiming she had disrupted a sacred balance that protected their lineage from ruin, a balance forged in the fires of desperation when Sir Edmund, facing bankruptcy after failed colonial ventures in the Indies during the late 1700s, had invoked the Wanderer's pact not out of malice but necessity, binding future generations to rituals that harvested bridal essences to replenish fortunes through uncanny means, such as dreams revealing buried treasures or intuitions guiding lucrative investments in the burgeoning Industrial Revolution. And now, with the curse fracturing, the manor's illusions began to peel away, wallpaper curling to reveal hidden inscriptions in faded ink, detailing lineages of brides whose sacrifices had built the empire, from Eliza in 1795, who foresaw the Napoleonic War's end and advised stock sales accordingly, to Henrietta in 1837, whose visions during her wedding night led to the discovery of coal seams on estate lands, fueling the family's ascent into Victorian high society, and Eleanor, clutching the scroll with its counterspell, realized the depth of the web, for breaking it fully required not just words but a series of trials, each unveiling deeper layers of the mystery, perhaps starting with confronting the Wanderer's shade in a dream realm accessible only under the full moon's gaze, which conveniently aligned with this very night. The lunar orb hanging bloated and silver in the sky visible through the chapel's arched panes, and as Reginald lunged weakly, grasping at her ankle with gnarled fingers that betrayed his rapid decay, his once smooth skin now etched with wrinkles like cracked parchment, she kicked free, fleeing into the manor's labyrinthine halls, her footsteps echoing amid the sudden cacophony of awakening spirits, portraits rattling on walls as if the depicted ancestors stirred in protest, and she sought refuge in the library. A vast room lined with leather-bound volumes that smelled of mildew and forbidden knowledge, where she barricaded the door with a heavy oak chair, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she pored over the scroll by candlelight, deciphering more Latin phrases that hinted at additional artifacts scattered throughout Blackthorn, a dagger in the armory that could sever ethereal bonds, a mirror in the attic that reflected true intentions, and a locket in the garden's folly that contained a lock of the Wanderer's hair, essential for the final banishment, and suspense thickened like fog rolling in from the moors as knocks pounded on the door. Reginald's voice warped into something inhuman, pleading then threatening, revealing in his desperation fragments of his own torment, how he had been groomed from boyhood to uphold the tradition, witnessing his mother's slow fading after her wedding night, her vitality siphoned to extend his grandfather's life amid the cholera outbreaks of the 1840s. And Eleanor felt a pang of pity amid her fear, wondering if redemption was possible for him too, or if the curse had corrupted his soul irreparably. But time pressed, the clock's chimes marking the approach of midnight when the moon's power would peak, allowing her to enter the dream realm via a trance induced by chanting the scroll's verses while holding the amulet, and she prepared, extinguishing all but one candle to minimize distractions, her mind racing through strategies to gather the other artifacts without Reginald's interference, perhaps allying with Inspector Graves, who had left his card with a promise to return if new leads emerged, or enlisting Agnes more deeply, the maid having slipped a note under the door earlier, warning of loyal servants brainwashed by the curse to protect the Lord, like the butler Hawkins, a hulking figure with a scarred face from some unexplained accident, rumored to have disposed of bodies in the bogs under Reginald's orders, and as the pounding ceased, replaced by eerie silence that was somehow more ominous, Eleanor began to chant, her voice steady despite the turmoil, the amulet warming against her chest, and the world blurred, colors bleeding into grayscale as she transitioned into the dreamscape, an ethereal mirror of Blackthorn where corridors stretched infinitely and rooms shifted like puzzle pieces, populated by manifestations of the past, ghostly servants replaying daily routines, brides in various states of despair wandering aimlessly. And at the center, in a throne room that didn't exist in reality, sat the Wanderer, his hooded form exuding an aura of ancient malevolence, his voice a sibilant whisper that echoed in her mind, offering to dissolve the pact if she surrendered a piece of her own soul, perhaps her capacity for love or her memories of family, a tempting bargain given the horrors, but Eleanor resisted, demanding the full truth, and he obliged with visions projected like lantern slides. Sir Edmund's initial encounter in a smoky London tavern during the American Revolution's aftermath, the Wanderer, a displaced alchemist from Ottoman lands, fleeing persecution after failed experiments in immortality, proposing the pact as mutual benefit, but embedding clauses that ensured perpetual servitude, evolving over generations into the wedding night rituals that adapted to Victorian mores, masking occultism behind propriety, and in this revelation, Eleanor spotted weaknesses. The pact's vulnerability to pure intent untainted by greed, which explained why some brides survived diminished but alive, their partial resistance weakening the hold, and she countered with the scroll's incantations, the dream realm quaking as fissures appeared in the illusory walls, the wanderer recoiling with a howl that reverberated back to the physical world, jolting her awake in the library just as the door burst open, Hawkins looming with a cudgel raised, sent by Reginald to retrieve her. And a frantic chase ensued through the manor's twisting passages, Eleanor dodging into secret alcoves she now intuited thanks to the amulet's guidance, her gown tearing on protruding nails as she navigated toward the armory, a fortified room in the west wing filled with antique weapons from Ashford Crusader ancestors, where the dagger supposedly lay hidden in a suit of armor's gauntlet, and bursting in, she rummaged desperately, the metallic clangs masking Hawkins' approach until he grabbed her shoulder, his grip like iron, but she whirled, amulet flashing, and a burst of energy repelled him, sending him stumbling into a rack of swords that clattered down, buying her time to seize the dagger, its blade inscribed with runes that glowed upon touch, and with it, she felt a surge of clarity, visions guiding her next to the attic, up creaking stairs laden with cobwebs that brushed her face like spectral fingers, the space cluttered with trunks of forgotten heirlooms, where the mirror stood shrouded in dust cloth, and unveiling it, she gazed into its depths, not seeing her reflection but Reginald's true form, a soul fractured by the curse, part human, part vessel for the wanderer's influence, explaining his dual nature of charm and cruelty, and the mirror shattered of its own accord after the revelation, shards raining like crystal tears, signifying another crack in the curse, but alarms rang in her mind as flames flickered below. Reginald perhaps setting fire to the manor in madness to trap her or destroy evidence, smoke seeping under doors, and Eleanor fled downward, dagger in hand, toward the gardens under the moon's watchful eye, the folly a ruined pavilion overgrown with ivy, where the locket was buried beneath a rosebush thorny as the family crest, and digging with bare hands, soil caking her nails, she unearthed it, a silver oval containing not just hair but a miniature portrait of the wanderer. His eyes piercing even in paint, and assembling the artifacts, amulet, dagger, mirror shard she had pocketed, locket, she returned to the chapel, the manor's halls now choked with smoke and cries of evacuating servants, Agnes meeting her there with Graves, who had returned sensing trouble after a tip from a moor watcher spotting unnatural lights, and together they formed a circle around the altar. Eleanor chanting the final verses as the artifacts levitated, merging energies in a vortex that summoned the wanderer's full manifestation, a towering shadow that bellowed challenges, revealing the ultimate secret. The curse was not just for power but to contain a greater evil, a demonic entity the alchemist had bound, and breaking it risked unleashing it upon the world, a twist that halted Eleanor, for in Victorian society, where spiritualism mingled with science, such entities could wreak havoc on an empire already strained by industrial unrest and colonial uprisings, and she wavered. Reginald crawling in, pleading to maintain the pact modified, but Graves, pragmatic detective, urged destruction, citing case files of similar occult disturbances in London slums, and Agnes whispered of her own lost sister, a former bridesmaid vanished years ago, fueling Eleanor's resolve to end it, adapting the spell to banish both curse and entity, the chapel quaking as light erupted, consuming the shadow in a blaze that singed the air, and as it faded, peace descended, Reginald collapsing. Truly aged but freed, murmuring gratitude before expiring, the manor sighing as if relieved, flames extinguishing supernaturally, and Eleanor, artifacts crumbling to dust in her hands, stood transformed, the dark secrets of Victorian wedding nights laid bare and banished, yet whispers lingered, hinting at offshoots of the pact in other noble houses, perhaps seeding future mysteries for her to unravel as a guardian against the occult, with Graves as ally in investigations blending police work with the paranormal, and Agnes as confidant preserving the tales. But for now, as dawn crusted the moors, washing away the night's terrors, she stepped into the light, the story's suspense evolving into resolution yet open-ended, for in historical enigmas, one unraveling often births another, and Eleanor's journey through the remaining parts would explore these branches, delving into connected scandals like the Langford family's own dark rituals or whispers from Queen Victoria's court of suppressed occult societies, each part building upon the last with intricate details of era-specific customs, from seances and drawing rooms to alchemical labs and basements, all in simple English weaving suspense, mystery, and historical intrigue into a tapestry that hooked deeper with every thread, her wedding night the catalyst for a saga spanning continents and conspiracies, where women like her rose from subjugation to saviors, challenging the patriarchal shadows of Victorian England, and as birds sang their morning chorus, oblivious to the drama, Eleanor pondered the cost of her victory, her innocence lost not to matrimony but to knowledge, her heart scarred yet stronger, ready for the clock to tick toward new midnights filled with promise and peril, in this ongoing narrative that promised more layers, more secrets, more lengthy explorations of the human soul's darker corners, all evoked in vivid, accessible prose that transported one to the gaslit streets and misty manners of a bygone age, where every whisper could be a clue, every shadow a threat, and every bride a potential heroine in the fight against eternal darkness. But wait, the tale was far from over, for as she turned back to the manor, a faint cry echoed from the crypt, suggesting not all spirits were at rest, perhaps a remnant entity or a forgotten bride calling for aid, pulling her back into the web. And thus Part 3 transitioned seamlessly into the anticipation of Part 4, with Eleanor's resolve tested anew by fresh discoveries, like a hidden journal in Reginald's study detailing international branches of the Wanderer's cult, involving figures from the East India Company and even whispers of involvement in the Jack the Ripper mysteries later in the decade, though anachronistic yet fitting the suspenseful arc, blending fact with fiction to heighten the thrill, and she vowed to pursue these leads. Traveling to London with Graves, navigating the bustling metropolis of horse-drawn cabs and fog-shrouded alleys, interviewing mediums and historians who specialized in occult Victorian lore, uncovering artifacts in museums that resonated with the amulet's former power, and facing antagonists like Reginald's distant cousin, Lord Harrington, no relation to her maiden name but a coincidence that added irony, who sought to revive the curse for his own gain amid the economic booms of the railway era. Plotting abductions of potential brides from society balls, and Eleanor's investigations would entwine with real historical events, like the Great Exhibition of 1851 retrospectively or the upcoming Exposition Universelle, but timed to her present, crafting a narrative rich with detail, from the sense of coal smoke and perfume to the sounds of violin quartets at galas, all building suspense through chases in underground tunnels beneath the Thames or seances gone awry in Mayfair townhouses, where spirits revealed partial truths that led to dead ends or dangerous traps, and allies emerged, such as a female journalist posing as a suffragette precursor, documenting the underbelly of noble depravities, and together they formed a secret society of sorts, the Veiled Guardians, dedicated to exposing and eradicating such curses that preyed on women under the guise of marriage traditions, each member bringing skills, Graves with deduction, Agnes with insider knowledge, the journalist with publicity, and Eleanor's amulet remnants granting subtle intuitions, like forewarnings of danger or glimpses of hidden motives in conversations, and as the plot thickened, betrayals loomed, perhaps Agnes harboring a secret loyalty or Graves tempted by bribes from powerful families, adding layers of interpersonal mystery to the occult suspense, all while Eleanor grappled with her widowhood, society viewing her with suspicion as the lady who drove her husband mad, whispers at tea suggesting she poisoned him with exotic herbs, forcing her to navigate reputational perils alongside supernatural ones, and in quieter moments she reflected on her wedding day's innocence, how the veil had lifted not just metaphorically but literally into realms beyond, transforming her from naive bride to empowered investigator, a character arc that mirrored emerging feminist sentiments in Victorian literature, like those in Bronte novels but with a darker, more mysterious twist. And the story's length allowed for elaborate subplots, such as a detour to the Scottish Highlands where a branch of the Ashford curse manifested in clan weddings involving locked monsters or ancient druidic pacts, blending Celtic mythology with Victorian Gothic, Eleanor journeying by steam train through rugged landscapes, encountering Highland lairds with their own dark secrets, perhaps a love interest in a skeptical doctor who aids her with rational explanations that eventually yield to the supernatural evidence, adding romance to the suspense without overshadowing the core mystery, and battles ensued, not with swords but with wits and wills, incantations clashing against skepticism, artifacts collected like puzzle pieces, a thistle brooch from the north, a vial of holy water from a hidden abbey, culminating in rituals under northern lights that paralleled the Moor's mists, each success weakening the global web of the Wanderer's influence, which spanned to colonial outposts in India where the alchemist originated. hinting at future parts venturing overseas via clipper ships, facing tropical storms and cultural enigmas, all in service of the overarching narrative that wedding nights, in their intimacy and vulnerability, were perfect vessels for historical horrors, exposing societal undercurrents of control and exploitation. And Eleanor's tale, told in simple, flowing English, invited immersion into this world, with descriptions vivid yet accessible, the rustle of silk skirts against stone floors, the bitter taste of laudanum lace tea used to subdue resistant brides, the chill of fog seeping through cracked casements, building atmosphere that heightened every twist, every revelation, ensuring the reader's hook remained firm, suspense mounting like a crescendo in a symphony of shadows. And as Part 3 drew toward its transitional close, Eleanor, back in London after a narrow escape from a cult ambush in Whitechapel alleys, stared at a map pinned with red strings connecting cursed sites. Realizing the ultimate confrontation lay in Constantinople, the wanderer's homeland, where the original Pact Stone resided in a forgotten mosque, setting the stage for epic voyages and deeper dives into Orientalist mysteries blended with Victorian adventure, her determination unyielding, the clock ever ticking toward new midnights of discovery and danger. In this expansive saga that promised no swift ends but prolonged intrigue, layer upon intricate layer, secret nestled within secret, all evoked in prose that captured the essence of an era where the profound lurked behind the proper, and one woman's curiosity ignited a firestorm against empires of darkness, forging paths of light or new chains of fate, the choice perpetually hers in the heart of the mounting enigma that was her life as Lady Ashford reborn, guardian eternal or destroyer destined, with time's relentless march revealing all in due course, as the narrative pulsed onward, inexorably into the unknown depths of history's veiled nights, where the flickering gas lamps of London's labyrinthine streets cast elongated shadows that danced like conspiratorial whispers among the cobblestones. Eleanor found herself thrust into a whirlwind of preparations for her voyage to Constantinople, the ancient city where the wanderer's origins lay shrouded in the mists of Ottoman lore and alchemical enigmas. A journey that promised to unravel the final threads of the Ashford curse, but at the risk of entangling her in even grander webs of international intrigue. For as she pored over faded maps and cryptic telegrams in the dimly lit study of her temporary lodgings in Baker Street, a modest townhouse lent by Inspector Graves, whose connections in the yard afforded such discretions amid the bustling metropolis of 1850s Victorian England, alive with the clamor of horse-drawn omnibuses and the cries of street vendors hawking hot chestnuts and broadsheets detailing the latest scandals, she pieced together clues from Reginald's hidden journal, a leather-bound tome discovered amid the rubble of Blackthorn's crypt, its pages yellowed and ink-smeared with entries chronicling Sir Edmund's fateful meeting with the Wanderer, described not as a mere alchemist but as a rogue vizier exiled from the Sultan's court after failed experiments in transmuting base metals into gold, experiments that inadvertently summoned lesser jinn bound to pacts of eternal servitude. And this wanderer, named Khalid al-Rashid in the scrawled notes, had fled eastward, influences westward, embedding his maledictions in noble bloodlines across Europe, from the Ashfords in England to rumored counterparts in Prussian baronies and French chateaux, where similar wedding night rituals masqueraded as aristocratic traditions, siphoning bridal vitalities to fuel ambitions in the era's colonial scrambles. And Eleanor, now widowed and whispered about in society parlors as the cursed Lady Ashford, whose union ended in madness and manor tremors that locals attributed to an earthquake, though Graves' reports suggested otherwise, resolved to sail aboard the steamship Orient Express, not the train of later fame but a paddle-wheeled vessel plying the Mediterranean routes, its decks crowded with merchants, diplomats, and adventurers seeking fortunes in the Levant, and she assembled her unlikely cadre. Graves, the pragmatic inspector with his revolver tucked under his frock coat, and a notebook filled with sketches of occult symbols gleamed from yard archives on unsolved vanishings. Agnes, the loyal maid who had packed trunks with practical disguises like simple muslin dresses and veiled bonnets to blend among Constantinople's bazaars, her own backstory revealing a distant Turkish ancestry from a grandmother captured in the Crimean skirmishes, adding linguistic aid, and the journalist, Miss Clara Beaumont, a fiery spinster in her 30s who wrote under the pseudonym C.B. Truth Seeker for the radical penny papers, her articles exposing sweatshop horrors and now turning to the supernatural underbelly of empire, armed with a portable typewriter and a network of correspondents in foreign ports. and as the group boarded the ship at Southampton docks amid the salty tang of sea air mingled with coal smoke from the funnels, Eleanor clutched the locket's remnant, a single strand of Al-Rashid's hair woven into a braid that hummed with residual energy, serving as a compass of sorts, warming when pointed toward the pack's source, and the voyage commenced under stormy skies that mirrored her inner turmoil, waves crashing against the hull like accusations from the deep, where perhaps drowned brides from similar curses lingered as sirens, their songs luring sailors to doom in folklore that Clara recited over evening teas in the saloon, blending Greek myths with Ottoman tales of Paris and Ifrits, heightening the suspense as strange occurrences plagued the passage. Passengers reporting nightmares of veiled women pleading from mirrors, a cabin boy vanishing overboard during a gale with witnesses swearing he was pulled by invisible hands, and Eleanor's own visions returning in fevered dreams, showing Al-Rashid's packed stone as an obsidian slab inscribed with Arabic runes in a forgotten mosque beneath the Hagia Sophia's shadow, guarded by cult remnants who performed inverted wedding ceremonies at midnight, binding living sacrifices to sustain the jinn's bindings, and midway across the Atlantic, no, the Mediterranean, after Gibraltar Strait, where the rock loomed like a sentinel, the ship docked briefly at Malta for provisions, allowing Eleanor to send coded telegrams to potential allies, like a British consul in Constantinople rumored to collect esoteric artifacts. But intrigue deepened when a shadowy figure in a fez attempted to pilfer her locket during a marketplace stroll, thwarted only by Graves' quick draw, the assailant escaping into the labyrinth of Valletta's alleys muttering curses in Turkish that Agnes translated as invocations to the eternal binder, confirming the cult's reach extended tentacles across seas, perhaps infiltrating the East India Company's ranks to spread the malediction to colonial brides in Bombay or Calcutta, where arranged marriages hid similar dark secrets amid the spice-scented Havelis. And resuming the sail, the group delved into strategy sessions in their cramped cabins, poring over smuggled books on Ottoman occultism that Clara had procured from a shady bookseller in Gibraltar, volumes detailing Al-Rashid's fall from grace after a botched ritual that unleashed a minor demon upon the Sultan's harem, leading to disappearances blamed on eunuch intrigues but truly the genesis of the wedding night pacts as a containment method, exporting the curse to unwitting Europeans like Sir Edmund who sought quick riches post-American independence losses. And Eleanor's determination hardened like steel forged in adversity, her simple upbringing as a merchant's daughter now a strength, unencumbered by noble pretensions, allowing her to empathize with the curse's victims across classes and cultures, from English ladies to perhaps enslaved concubines in the Sublime Porte, and upon arriving in Constantinople's Golden Horn harbor, the city sprawled before them in a tapestry of minarets piercing the sky, domes gleaming under the Byzantine sun, and the cacophony of muezzin calls blending with vendors' shouts in the Grand Bazaar, where spices, silks, and secrets traded hands, the air thick with incense and mystery that quickened Eleanor's pulse, for here the historical layers peeled back like onion skins, from Roman aqueducts to Ottoman palaces, each stratum potentially hiding clues to the packed stone, and disguised as a traveling scholars' party, they navigated the winding streets of Sultanate, avoiding Janissary patrols, though disbanded decades prior. Their spiritual successors in secret societies lingered, and sought the forgotten mosque, described in the journal as the Masjid al-Asrar, or Mosque of Secrets, buried beneath modern structures after an earthquake in the 1700s, accessible via catacombs rumored to connect to the basilica cistern's watery depths, where columns rose from submerged floors like drowned sentinels, and enlisting a local guide, a wizened Armenian antiquarian named Aram who traded in forbidden maps for gold sovereigns, they descended into the underworld. Lanterns casting ripples on stagnant pools, the air dank with mildew and echoes of dripping water that masked potential footsteps of pursuers, for the cult had eyes everywhere, as evidenced by a poisoned dart narrowly missing Clara during their bizarre inquiries, its tip laced with a hallucinogen that induced visions akin to the elixir's effects. And deeper in the catacombs, murals faded on walls depicted Al-Rashid's rituals. Brides in flowing robes kneeling before the obsidian slab, their essences drawn into swirling vortices that empowered the bound jinn, granting wishes twisted into curses, and suspense mounted as traps activated, pressure plates triggering collapsing ceilings, forcing the group to leap across chasms where bottomless pits yawned, Graves' ropework saving Agnes from a fall, and illusions assailed them, spectral grooms appearing to whisper temptations of power if they abandoned the quest. but Eleanor's braid compass guided true, leading to the mosque's ruins. A cavernous chamber where the pack stone loomed etched with glowing runes that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, guarded by cultists in black robes chanting incantations, their leader a veiled woman claiming descent from Al-Rashid's betrayed consort, who had woven the original curse as revenge, adding a feminist twist to the malediction's origins, for in Ottoman harems, women's subjugation bred secret sorceries, and a fierce confrontation ensued, daggers clashing in the dim light. Graves firing shots that echoed like thunder, Clara wielding her typewriter case as a bludgeon, Agnes hurling vials of holy water pilfered from a nearby church, and Eleanor, channeling the artifact's lingering energies through the braid, chanted a hybrid spell merging Latin from the scroll with Arabic phrases Aram translated on the fly, the stone cracking as the djinn manifested, a smoky colossus roaring challenges that shook the foundations, revealing the ultimate depth. The entity was no mere demon, but a fallen peri, a benevolent spirit corrupted by Al-Rashid's greed, seeking release rather than domination, and in a moment of empathy, Eleanor offered alliance instead of banishment, promising to free it in exchange for severing all pacts worldwide, the peri accepting with a whirlwind that dispersed the cultists, healing wounds and granting visions of affected families across continents. From a Prussian baroness awakening from a coma to an Indian Raja's daughter reclaiming her vitality. And as the stone shattered in a burst of light, the catacombs stabilizing, the group emerged victorious into the bustling streets above, the city's eternal hum a symphony of renewal. But whispers persisted, for the peri's freedom birthed subtle aftereffects, heightened intuitions in former victims, perhaps seeding a network of empowered women against future occult threats. And Eleanor, gazing at the Bosphorus's shimmering waters dividing east and west, pondered her role in this new era. Her wedding night's horrors transmuted into a legacy of liberation, yet the saga's threads extended, hinting at residual pacts in Russian courts or American plantations, where transatlantic slave trades intertwined with mystical bindings, setting stages for future voyages, alliances with figures like a New Orleans voodoo priestess or a Siberian shaman. Each part unfolding more historical tapestries blending Victorian propriety with global mysticisms, from the Opium War's opium dens hiding ritual chambers to Australian gold rushes unearthing cursed relics, all in simple prose evoking scents of jasmine tea in Constantinople cafes, tastes of baklava shared in victory, sounds of distant adhin calls fading into night, building suspense through personal growth, betrayals like Aram's potential double agency revealed in a postscript note, and romances budding with a dashing consular attaché who aided their escape. Adding layers of emotion to the mystery, Eleanor's character evolving from frightened bride to worldly adventuress, challenging gender norms in an age of corsets and conventions, her story a beacon against the dark secrets that lurked in matrimonial veils across cultures, and as stars wheeled overhead in the oriental sky, time's march propelled her toward new horizons, the narrative expanding into realms of steampunk inventions aiding quests, like etheric detectors for spirit traces, or political intrigues with Disraeli's cabinet suppressing occult reports to maintain empire stability, each revelation birthing queries anew, hooking deeper into the enigma's core, where history's veiled nights concealed not just horrors but hopes for dawn's breaking light, and thus Part 4 transitioned, the pulse of adventure quickening inexorably toward Part 5's uncharted territories, with Eleanor's resolve to compass true amid storms of suspense and seas of secrets yet to sail. She stood on the deck of a clipper ship bound for the distant shores of British India, the vessel's sails billowing like the wings of some mythical bird against the azure expanse of the Indian Ocean, where turquoise waves crested and crashed in rhythmic fury, carrying whispers of ancient monsoons that had swallowed fleets whole in centuries past, and as the salty spray misted her face, mingling with the sweat of tropical heat that clung to her simple traveling gown, chosen for practicality over the elaborate crinolines of Victorian fashion back home, Eleanor reflected on the whirlwind. Weeks since their triumph in Constantinople, where the Peri's liberation had sent ripples through the ether, awakening dormant intuitions in women across the empire who had suffered under similar veiled curses, letters arriving via telegraph and post from as far as Cape Town and Sydney, detailing sudden recoveries from mysterious ailments or vivid dreams revealing hidden family pacts, and these missives fueled her new purpose, transforming her from a mere survivor of Blackthorn's horrors to a reluctant leader of an underground network dubbed the Unveiled Sisters, a clandestine group of empowered females, widows, spinsters, and even disguised noblewomen, who communicated through coded advertisements in the Times or smuggled notes in exported tea crates, sharing knowledge of occult bindings that masqueraded as matrimonial traditions in colonial outposts, where European customs clashed with local mysticisms to birth hybrid nightmares, and now, with Graves at her side poring over nautical charts in the captain's quarters, his pipe smoke curling like question marks in the humid air, Agnes below decks organizing supplies of herbs and talismans gathered from Constantinople's apothecaries, mixtures of saffron, myrrh, and henna said to ward off jinn-like entities, and Clara Beaumont furiously typing dispatches for underground presses that exposed the Empire's shadowy underbelly without alerting censors. The quartet set their sights on Bombay, where Reginald's journal hinted at a branch of Al-Rashid's cult thriving amid the bustling port's chaos, intertwined with the East India Company's opium trade, for in the opium dens of the city's labyrinthine bazaars, brides from mixed Anglo-Indian unions were reportedly subjected to trance-inducing rituals on their wedding nights, their visions harvested to predict market fluctuations in poppy harvests, or to curse rival traders, ensuring the company's monopolies through supernatural means that blended Victorian propriety with Hindu tantric elements and Islamic Sufism, creating a potent brew of cross-cultural maledictions that Eleanor aimed to dismantle before they spread further into the subcontinent's princely states, where Maharajas' harems hid similar secrets behind latticed Eurokas, and as the ships sliced through equatorial waters, dolphins arcing playfully alongside as if escorts from the deep, suspense began to build with peculiar omens. A stowaway discovered in the hold, a gaunt man with eyes like polished obsidian who muttered prophecies in Urdu about a veiled queen, rising to challenge the eternal binder's remnants, only to vanish during a squall as if dissolved into the rain. Nocturnal apparitions on the quarterdeck, ghostly figures in saris weeping for lost dowries that turned out to be illusions induced by tainted water from a previous port, forcing Graves to ration supplies and investigate sabotage. And Eleanor's own braid relic, now fashioned into a pendant, glowing faintly at night to reveal maps etched in phosphorescent lines on her cabin's bulkhead, guiding them to a specific temple in the Elephanta Caves off Bombay's coast, where an ancient Shiva lingam supposedly concealed a sister stone to the pack slab, inscribed with Sanskrit verses that could amplify or nullify residual curses if chanted under a lunar eclipse, which astronomical tables confirmed was mere days away, heightening the urgency as the ship battled headwinds that seemed unnaturally persistent. Perhaps conjured by cult weather mages rumored to dwell in Goa's Portuguese enclaves, and upon docking in Bombay's Victoria Dock amid the cacophony of coolies shouting, elephants trumpeting as they hauled cargo, and the spicy aromas of masala chai wafting from street stalls, the group disembarked incognito, Eleanor veiled in a burqa borrowed from Agnes's ancestral trunk to blend with the multicultural throng. Parsas in top hats, Marwari merchants in turbans, and British memsahibs in pith helmets fanning themselves against the relentless sun, and they secured lodgings in a discreet dak bungalow on the outskirts, a colonial rest house with verandas overlooking the Arabian Sea, where ceiling punkas swayed lazily to stir the air thick with mosquito netting and secrets, and here, Clara's contacts proved invaluable, introducing them to a local informant, Rajesh Singh, a reformed thuggy cultist turned scholar who had studied under Brahmin priests in Benares and now documented suppressed folklore for the Asiatic Society, his tales around the flickering oil lamp detailing how Al-Rashid's influence had arrived via Silk Road caravans centuries prior, merging with local Yakshini legends, female spirits who seduced men in marital guises only to drain their life force, and evolving in the Victorian era through company officers who imported the packs to control native populations, enforcing loyalty oaths disguised as wedding vows and mixed ceremonies that bound souls across reincarnations, a concept that chilled Eleanor as it implied the curse's immortality beyond physical death, potentially trapping her own essence in future lives if not fully eradicated. And armed with Rajesh's map sketched on palm leaves, the group ventured into the city's underbelly, navigating the narrow gullies of Dongri where opium lamps glowed in shadowy dens. Patrons lost in haze-induced reveries that masked ritual circles drawn in chalk on dirt floors, and in one such den, they witnessed a clandestine wedding night simulation, a young Anglo-Indian bride inhaling fumes from a hookah laced with datura, her eyes rolling back as she prophesied stock rises in cotton futures, her groom, a company clerk with greedy eyes, recording the utterances for his superiors. But interruption came swiftly when cult enforcers, tattooed with serpent motifs reminiscent of the Ashford crest, ambushed them. Daggers flashing in the dim light, forcing a chaotic escape through back alleys slick with monsoon puddles, Graves firing warning shots that echoed like Diwali firecrackers, Agnes hurling pouches of protective ash that burst into blinding sparks, Clara documenting the fray with frantic notes for her exposé, and Eleanor channeling the pendant's energy to summon an illusory fog that confused pursuers, allowing retreat to the bungalow where wounds were tended. A shallow cut on Rajesh's arm revealing a poison tip that induced fevered visions, from which he awoke babbling about the Elephanta Cave's hidden chamber, accessible only during low tide via a submerged tunnel guarded by tidal spirits. And with the eclipse approaching, suspense peaked as they prepared an expedition by felucca boat under cover of night, the sea phosphorescent with bioluminescent plankton that lit their path like underwater stars. But storms brewed, lightning illuminating monolithic statues of Tremurti carved into cave walls as they anchored and waded ashore, the air humming with ancient chants from invisible sources, perhaps echoes of forgotten sadhus, and delving into the cave's depths, basalt pillars looming like petrified giants, they encountered puzzles etched in stone, riddles in Prakrit script that Rajesh translated, requiring offerings of blood and intent to unlock doors, Eleanor's prick of her finger on a thorn, like protrusions swinging open a panel to reveal the sister stone, a granite slab veined with quartz that shimmered under torchlight, inscribed with verses invoking Parvati's wrath against binding spells, but guardians materialized, not spectral but living ascetics sworn to the cult, their bodies oiled and agile, wielding tridents in a martial dance that blended Kalaripayattu with hypnotic swaying. And battle raged in the echoing chamber, water seeping in as tide rose, adding peril as footing slipped on mossy rocks, Graves' revolver jamming from humidity, forcing hand-to-hand improvisation with broken stalactites, Agnes reciting counter-mantras learned from her grandmother that weakened foes, Clara using her wit to topple a loose boulder onto attackers, and Eleanor, at the stone's center, aligning the pendant with eclipse-shadowed moonlight filtering through a crevice, chanting hybridized incantations that fused Latin, Arabic, and Sanskrit into a resonant harmony, the slab vibrating as residual jinn fragments, splinters from the Peri's corruption, emerged as swirling sandstorms, screeching challenges that recounted histories of colonial exploitation, how the Pax had fueled the 1857 mutinies suppressions through prophetic advantages given to British generals, a revelation that shook Eleanor's faith in her empire's righteousness, exposing the dark undercurrents of progress built on mystical manipulations, and in a climactic surge, she offered the entities redemption, channeling Parvati's compassionate aspect to transmute their rage into release, the storms dissipating into gentle breezes carrying scents of lotus blooms, the stone cracking harmlessly, its power diffused across the subcontinent, awakening women in distant villages from trance-like subjugations, reports later confirming upticks in female-led rebellions against arranged marriages tainted by occult coercion. But victory was bittersweet as Rajesh succumbed to his wounds lingering poison, his dying words urging Eleanor to pursue the curse's American tendrils, where transatlantic slave trades had carried al-Rashid's seeds to southern plantations, blending with voodoo and hoodoo in New Orleans bayous, where wedding nights under Spanish moss involved loa possessions that bound souls to Cotton King's fortunes. And with this lead, the group mourned briefly before boarding a steamer for the long haul across oceans, via the Cape of Good Hope to avoid Suez delays, the journey fraught with pirate sightings off Madagascar, perhaps cult-hired privateers, and equatorial fevers that tested their mettle, Clara falling ill but recovering through Agnes's herbal remedies, Graves uncovering a spy among the crew who confessed to being a company mole, tossed overboard in dramatic justice, and Eleanor, in solitary deck walks under starlit skies, grappled with her evolving identity. No longer just a Victorian lady but a globe-trotting mystic warrior, her simple origins in London's merchant class now a badge of resilience against noble corruptions, romances hinting with the ship's doctor, a skeptical Scotsman named Dr. Malcolm Fraser, whose rationalism clashed yet complemented her intuitions, sparking debates over Darwin's theories versus spiritual realms, adding emotional depth to the suspense as mutual attraction grew amid shared dangers, like a rogue wave nearly capsizing the vessel. Saved only by Eleanor's pendant-guided premonition to brace, and arriving in New Orleans' humid embrace, The Mississippi Delta's languid waters reflecting gaslit levees where jazz precursors, brass bands in Congo Square, blended African rhythms with European melodies, mirroring the cultural fusions that hid the curse's mutations, and local allies emerged, a Creole priestess named Marie Laveau's fictional descendant, Zélie, who practiced voodoo with queenship grace. Her shop in the French Quarter stocked with ggreek bags and rootwork potions that resonated with Eleanor's artifacts, revealing how al-Rashid's packs had arrived via slave ships, twisted into bindings that forced enslaved brides into fertility rituals on plantation wedding nights, their offspring's labors supernaturally enhanced to boost harvests, perpetuating cycles of bondage both physical and ethereal, and Zélie guided them through swamp excursions by pirogue, Spanish moss draping like bridal veils over cypress knees, alligators eyeing them from murky depths as fireflies danced like the wisps, leading to a hidden loa altar in a bayou clearing, where obsidian mirror, kin to Constantinople's slab, reflected not faces but futures tainted by the curse, and rituals commenced under a harvest moon, drumming syncing with heartbeats as Zélie invoked Papa Legba to open crossroads, Eleanor offering her pendant as conduit, summoning remnant spirits. Enslaved ancestors wailing of stolen wedding joys turned to torments, and confrontations with plantation heirs, modern-day cultists in seersucker suits wielding shotguns and hexes, ensued in midnight skirmishes, mud sucking at boots as spells clashed, Graves' detective skills tracing ledgers of cursed fortunes, Clara exposing scandals in Yankee papers smuggled south, Agnes blending her Turkish herbs with local sassafras for protective elixirs, and Dr. Fraser, now smitten and allied, providing medical aid amid voodoo trances that revealed the curse's final core, a master pact anchored in al-Rashid's homeland but echoed globally, requiring simultaneous disruptions at key nodes, India's temple, America's altar, England's manor, to fully shatter, a realization dawning as communications via transatlantic cable confirmed synchronous events, like uprisings in Prussian courts mirroring their efforts, and in a feverish climax, Eleanor merged with a lower possession, her body channeling Ursula Frida's love and fury to shatter the mirror. Waves of liberation rippling outward, freeing spectral brides who danced in ethereal joy. But costs mounted, Zélie wounded fatally in the fray, her spirit ascending with promises of ancestral watch, and as dawn broke over the bayous, birdsong heralding renewal, Eleanor pondered the saga's expansion, hints of Arctic extensions via fur trade routes or Pacific islands through whaling ships, each harboring packed variants. Her network growing with telegraphed recruits from suffragette circles in Boston or Aboriginal shamans in Australia, the narrative weaving historical accuracies like the Underground Railroad's occult undertones or the California Gold Rush's cursed claims, all in simple prose evoking the sweat of southern heat, the tang of gumbo spices, the wail of blues harmonicas foreshadowing musical revolutions, building layers of intrigue with subplots of betrayal. Dr. Fraser's hidden company ties exposed then redeemed through love's confession, and triumphs like liberating a plantation's hidden brides. Their testimonies fueling abolitionist fires post-Civil War echoes. Though time to Victorian prequels, and Eleanor's arc deepened, from naive bride to global guardian, challenging imperial hypocrisies where wedding nights symbolized control over women's bodies and souls across races and realms, her resolve unyielding as the group sailed northward to New York, harbors buzzing with immigrant hopes, setting stages for urban mysteries in tenement shadows or Wall Street's gilded curses, where stock market crashes were prophesied in bridal dreams, each revelation birthing fresh quests, suspense coiling like bayou vines, secrets unfolding like lotus petals at dawn, the tale's length allowing immersion in era's textures, from the clatter of horse hooves on cobblestones to the rustle of petticoats in windswept decks, all hooking the soul into Victorian enigma's embrace, where one woman's wedding night sparked a worldwide odyssey against darkness veiled in vows. And as the clock of fate ticked toward new midnights, Eleanor's compass pointed ever onward. Through storms of history and seas of the unseen, into depths where more layers awaited peeling, mysteries multiplying like stars in the night sky, promising adventures that transcended borders and epochs, in this expansive saga of suspense, history, and human spirit's indomitable light against eternal shadows, forging paths where none dared tread before, her story a testament to curiosity's power and courage's flame, burning bright amid the veiled nights that history whispered but never fully revealed, until now, in parts that built upon each other like empires rising from ruins, each more intricate, each more enthralling, drawing the narrative inexorably toward horizons unknown yet irresistibly compelling, with Eleanor's heart the true anchor in the tempest of time's relentless tide that she gazed out from the bustling docks of New York Harbor, where the Statue of Liberty loomed in the distance like a silent sentinel welcoming the weary and the bold to America's shores, though in this Victorian era of the late 1850s, the statue was but a dream yet to be forged in French workshops, and instead the skyline was dominated by the spires of Trinity Church and the masts of clipper ships unloading cargoes of immigrants from Ireland's famine-struck lands and Germany's revolutionary upheavals. Their hopeful faces a stark contrast to the shadowed intrigues that now drew Eleanor northward into the heart of Manhattan's teeming streets, where gaslit avenues buzzed with the clatter of horse-drawn streetcars and the shouts of newsboys hawking headlines about the escalating tensions over slavery that would soon erupt into civil war. But for Eleanor, the battle was against a more insidious foe, the lingering tendrils of Al-Rashid's curse that had metastasized into the financial empires of Wall Street, where brokers in top hats and tailcoats traded not just stocks but souls, using prophetic visions gleaned from coerced wedding night rituals among the elites arranged marriages, binding heiresses to fortunes built on railroad speculations and cotton monopolies, and with her companions, Graves nursing a pipe while scanning crowds for tales, Agnes clutching a satchel of protective talismans now augmented with voodoo charms from Zeeley's legacy, Clara typing furiously on her portable machine to encode messages for the unveiled sisters' growing network, and Dr. Fraser, his Scottish brogue softening as he confessed deeper affections amid the voyage's perils, offering a steady hand that stirred Eleanor's guarded heart toward tentative romance. They delved into the city's underbelly, securing rooms in a discreet boarding house on Bleecker Street, where bohemian artists and abolitionist plotters mingled in parlors scented with cigar smoke and idealism, and here Clara's journalistic prowess unearthed leads from underground presses like Frederick Douglass's North Star, hinting at occult societies hidden behind Freemason lodges, where members performed inverted ceremonies on wedding eves to divine market crashes or political assassinations, blending Yankee ingenuity with imported European mysticisms that Al-Rashid's Pax had seeded via transatlantic migrations, and Eleanor's pendant, now a multifaceted relic incorporating strands from India, shards from America, and echoes from Constantinople, pulsed with warnings as they navigated the grid of Broadway's theaters and Fifth Avenue's mansions, where Gilded-Age precursors hosted balls that masked initiation rites for young brides-to-be, their corseted forms swaying to waltzes while elders whispered incantations over champagne flutes laced with hallucinogens derived from Amazonian vines smuggled through Brazilian ports, and suspense coiled tighter when a midnight rendezvous in Central Park's nascent ramble, still a wild tangle of rocks and ponds before Olmsted's designs, led to an ambush by cult financiers, their faces masked in velvet hoods, embroidered with dollar signs intertwined with serpents, wielding canes that doubled as ritual staves, and in the ensuing scuffle under moonlit oaks, Graves' revolver barked echoes across the sheep meadow, Agnes scattered powders that induced choking fits, Clara wielded her typewriter as an improvised weapon smashing against knees, Dr. Fraser applied medical knowledge to disarm with precise strikes to pressure points, and Eleanor, channeling the pendant's accumulated energies, summoned illusory barriers of fog that confused assailants, allowing escape into the labyrinth of Hell's Kitchen's tenements, where Irish gangs like the Dead Rabbits offered unwitting cover amid their turf wars, but not without cost, a graze on Fraser's arm that required stitching, during which he professed love in hushed tones, his eyes reflecting the gas lamp's flicker, prompting Eleanor to confront her own emotions, scarred by Reginald's betrayal yet yearning for genuine connection in this odyssey that had stripped her of naivety and clad her in resilience, and pressing onward, their investigations revealed a central nexus in the Astor family's opulent library, rumored to house a forbidden vault containing Al-Rashid's transatlantic ledger, a tome bound in human leather that chronicled pacts adapted to New World's ambitions. From binding Native American shamans' daughters in frontier weddings to ensure land grabs during the gold rush, to enchanting immigrant brides in sweatshop unions for industrial espionage, and infiltrating a society gala at the Astor Mansion, disguised as European nobility with forged invitations procured by Clara's forger contacts, Eleanor waltzed through crystal chandeliered ballrooms scented with orchids and intrigue, her gown a borrowed silk confection that whispered of past elegances, while Graves posed as her escort. His detective instincts spotting hidden doors behind tapestries depicting mythic unions, and as midnight struck, the true ritual commenced. In subterranean chambers accessed via a spiral staircase hidden in the wine cellar, where elite guests donned masks for an orgiastic ceremony blending bacchanalian excesses with occult bindings, brides selected from the crowd, often unwitting debutantes, forced to inhale fumes from braziers that induced visions of stock ticker prophecies, their essences siphoned to fuel the bulls and bears of Wall Street's frenzied trades. And Eleanor, slipping away during the revelry, cracked the vaults combination using pendant-guided intuitions that whispered numbers like 1776 twisted with Al-Rashid's birth year, retrieving the ledger whose pages burned her fingers with ethereal heat, revealing maps of global nodes extending to Australian penal colonies where convict brides endured rituals under southern stars, to Russian serf weddings amid Siberian tundras where pacts warded against czarist purges, and even to Pacific whaling stations where maritime unions hid curses that calmed storms for profitable voyages. But alarms blared as guards, hired Pinkertons with occult tattoos, descended, sparking a frantic chase through the mansion's service tunnels, gunfire ricocheting off brick walls, Agnes's talismans exploding in flashes to blind pursuers, Clara documenting with stolen photographs using a prototype camera, Fraser bandaging on the run, and Graves covering retreat with suppressive fire. Emerging into the night air of Madison Square where horse cabs clattered oblivious to the drama. And back at the boarding house, poring over the ledger by candlelight, they deciphered a master convergence, an upcoming solar eclipse visible over the Atlantic, during which all residual pacts could be synchronized and shattered if Eleanor performed a global ritual from a neutral point, perhaps aboard a ship at sea, linking minds with unveiled sisters worldwide through telepathic echoes amplified by the pendant. But dangers multiplied as betrayals surfaced, a mole within their circle, revealed. As a boarding house maid tempted by cult bribes, leading to a raid that forced flight to the Underground Railroad's hidden stations beneath churches, where abolitionist allies like Harriet Tubman-inspired figures provided sanctuary, sharing tales of how the curse had infiltrated slave auctions, binding women in mock weddings to masters for enhanced field yields. A horror that fueled Eleanor's rage against imperial hypocrisies spanning oceans, and rallying the network via smuggled missives she coordinated strikes, sisters in Sydney disrupting rituals in outback stations involving Aboriginal Dreamtime mergers, in St. Petersburg infiltrating royal betrothals to nullify czarist pacts, in Hawaii confronting whaler captains enchanted unions with native princesses, each action weakening the web as reports trickled in via Morse code telegraphs that buzzed with coded triumphs. But the eclipse loomed, compelling a hasty embarkation on a neutral steamer bound for Liverpool, the vessel A, floating microcosm of empire with passengers from diverse colonies, and at sea, as the sun dimmed to a corona of fire, Eleanor ascended to the deck pendant aloft, chanting a universal incantation woven from every culture's liberation verses, Latin psalms, Arabic surahs, Sanskrit mantras, voodoo invocations, Native American chants. The sky darkening as spectral forms of freed brides worldwide manifested in auroral lights, dancing across waves, and the cult's final guardians, stowaway assassins, lunged in desperation, daggers gleaming under eclipsed shadows. But the group's unity prevailed, Graves disarming with precision, Agnes shielding with barriers of salt and herbs, Clara rallying crew with impassioned speeches, Fraser protecting Eleanor with his body as the ritual peaked, the pendant shattering in a blaze that rippled through ether, severing pacts globally. Fortunes crumbling in distant markets as prophetic edges dulled, women awakening from trances in harems and homesteads alike. And as light returned, peace descended, the sea calming to mirror-like stillness, but echoes lingered, whispers of a primordial source beyond Al-Rashid, perhaps an ancient Atlantean artifact that birthed all such curses, hinting at submerged quests in future parts, and Eleanor, in Fraser's arms as romance blossomed fully, pondered her legacy, from Blackthorn's bridal chamber to worldwide waves. Her wedding night's dark secrets transmuted into light for oppressed souls, yet the saga expanded. Subplots unfolding like Russian dolls, a side venture to Mexico's Aztec ruins where colonial weddings hid blood pacts with Quetzalcoatl echoes, alliances with Zapatista precursors fighting hacienda bindings, or detours to China's forbidden city where dowager empresses wielded curse variants in imperial marriages, blending opium dreams with dragon lore, each layer adding historical depth. From the scents of jasmine in Oriental gardens to the tastes of tamales in Mesoamerican markets, sounds of didgeridoos in Australian rituals or balalaikas in Siberian ceremonies, all in simple English painting vivid tapestries of suspense, where betrayals like Fraser's momentary doubt resolved in devotion, triumphs birth inquiries of deeper origins, hooking deeper into enigma's embrace, Eleanor's heart anchoring not just her but a movement against veiled tyrannies. As time's tide carried the narrative onward to uncharted realms, where Victorian shadows met global dawns, promising more intricate weaves of mystery, adventure, and empowerment in parts yet to unfold, each more expansive, each more enthralling, drawing the soul into history's relentless current of secrets and salvations, with no end in sight but endless horizons of intrigue awaiting the brave. Eleanor leaned against the railing of the steamer, as it chugged steadily up the Hudson River toward Albany, the autumn foliage along the banks ablaze in hues of crimson and gold that mirrored the fiery determination burning within her soul. For though the global eclipse ritual had shattered the visible chains of Al-Rashid's pacts, subtle undercurrents persisted like whispers in the wind, manifesting in dreams that plagued her nights aboard ship, visions of an underwater citadel where ancient artifacts pulsed with primordial energy, suggesting that the curses she had battled were mere offshoots of a deeper, Atlantean root buried beneath oceanic abysses. A legendary civilization whose matrimonial bindings had supposedly survived cataclysms to influence modern empires through submerged relics that amplified human greed and subjugation, and now, with the ledger's cryptic addendums hinting at expeditions funded by Astor fortunes to Arctic ice floes where whaling ships had stumbled upon crystalline obelisks etched with protoscripts predating Sumeria, Eleanor resolved to pivot northward, rallying her companions in a hastily convened council in the steamer's salon, where the clink of teacups against saucers punctuated discussions amid the hum of paddle wheels churning the river's murky waters, Graves furrowing his brow over maps of polar routes sketched with charcoal on linen napkins, Agnes brewing fortifying tisanes from her ever-expanding herbarium now including ginseng roots bartered from Chinese merchants in New York's Chinatown, Clara composing encrypted cables to unveiled sisters in Copenhagen and St. Petersburg for logistical support in icy realms, and Dr. Fraser, his hand gently clasping Eleanor's under the table in a gesture of burgeoning partnership that blended professional camaraderie with tender affection, proposing medical provisions against scurvy and frostbite drawn from his Edinburgh training, all while the group pondered the ledger's tales of a 1820s whaler captain, one Ezekiel Harrow, who had wed a Inuit shaman's daughter in a ritual under northern lights, unwittingly activating a pact variant that granted navigational prophecies for safe passages through Northwest Passage icebergs, but at the cost of her vitality siphoned to extend his voyage's profits, a pattern echoing across polar explorations where Victorian adventurers like Franklin's ill-fated crew might have perished not from natural perils but from curse-induced hallucinations leading them astray. And upon docking in Albany's industrial wharves laden with timber and iron from upstate mills, they transferred to a stagecoach, rattling over rutted roads toward Montreal, the Canadian frontier a mosaic of French habitant farms and British garrisons where fur trade legacies intertwined with native lore, and in a cozy inn overlooking the St. Lawrence, they encountered a grizzled trapper named Jacques Leblanc, a Metis descendant with eyes like polished agate who shared fireside stories over pemmican and brandy, recounting how Al-Rashid's influences had trickled northward via Jesuit missionaries carrying Ottoman relics as curios, merging with Algonquin wedding ceremonies that bound spirits to canoes for eternal hunts, but twisted by colonial greed into bindings that forced brides into visions of beaver pelt abundances or gold vein locations in the Klondike precursors, and Leblanc, intrigued by Eleanor's pendant remnants, now a fused amulet of global essences that hummed in his presence, agreed to guide them via dogs led across frozen tundras once winter's grip tightened, but suspense mounted as omens appeared, wolf howls echoing unnaturally close during moonless nights, suggesting shape-shifting guardians of the curse, a sudden blizzard stranding them in a log cabin where cabin fever bred paranoia, Graves suspecting Leblanc of ulterior motives until a shared vision from the amulet revealed his pure intent, scarred by his own sister's disappearance after a forced union with a Hudson's Bay Company factor, and Clara's dispatches intercepted by mounted patrols, hinting at governmental complicity in suppressing occult reports to maintain trade monopolies, forcing coded communications via carrier pigeons trained in secret aviaries, And as snow blanketed the landscape in pristine silence broken only by the crunch of sled runners, the expedition pressed into the Arctic Circle, auroras undulating overhead like celestial veils in greens and purples that mirrored bridal gowns from diverse cultures. And amid ice floes cracking like thunder, they discovered Harrow's wrecked ship preserved in permafrost, its hold containing journals detailing the obelisk's location, a submerged temple off Baffin Island's coast, accessible only during equinoctial low tides when ice parted like Red Sea waters, and diving preparations ensued with rudimentary gear borrowed from whaling stations, leather suits weighted with lead, hand-pumped air hoses that Fraser modified with his inventive flair, and Eleanor, braving frigid depths in a plunge that chilled to the bone, navigated coral-encrusted ruins where bioluminescent algae illuminated Atlantean friezes depicting wedding rites that bound continents' fates, the central artifact a crystalline sphere pulsing with holographic memories of lost civilizations, revealing Al-Rashid as a mere conduit for this ancient power, a refugee from Atlantis' fall who had scattered shards worldwide to preserve the binding magic used by rulers to control populaces through matrimonial controls that ensured loyal heirs and prophetic advantages, and guardians awoke. Ethereal merfolk hybrids patrolling with trident-like energy lances, their forms shimmering in watery mirages, and underwater skirmishes unfolded, Eleanor's amulet projecting barriers of light, graves surfacing for air to fire harpoons modified with explosive tips, Agnes chanting surface incantations that rippled below as sonic waves disorienting foes, Clara documenting via waterproof sketches for posterity, Fraser diving to rescue Eleanor from a collapsing chamber where stone slabs threatened to entomb her, his kiss upon resurfacing sealing their bond in a moment of life-affirming passion amid the icy spray, and seizing the sphere, Eleanor ascended, the artifact's activation triggering seismic shifts that calved icebergs in spectacular displays, but also unleashing visions of interconnected curses spanning epochs. From Egyptian pharaohs' consorts bound in pyramid rituals to Mayan priestesses sacrificed in cenote weddings, all threads leading back to Atlantis' hubris in defying natural unions for power, and back on solid ice, with LeBlanc's sled dogs yipping in excitement, they performed a ritual under the Aurora's canopy, merging the sphere with amulet remnants in a fusion that sent shockwaves through global ley lines, freeing residual spirits in distant locales like African tribal marriages twisted by colonial diamond trades or South American Inca descendants' unions hiding gold prophecies. Reports flooding in via telegraph relays of women rising in empowerment, from Maori Wahine challenging Pakeha bindings in New Zealand to Bedouin brides breaking nomadic packs in Arabian deserts, each liberation a ripple expanding the unveiled sisters' influence into a worldwide sisterhood against veiled oppressions. But costs emerged, LeBlanc succumbing to exposure in a heroic push through a wideout, his spirit joining the auroral dances as a guiding light, and Eleanor, warmed by Fraser's embrace in a fur-lined tent, contemplated the sphere's warnings of a final guardian. A timeless entity embodying the original Atlantean sin, perhaps slumbering in Antarctic wastes where no Victorian explorer had yet tread, hinting at southern voyages aboard ironclad ships equipped for polar extremes, alliances with figures like a Norwegian whaler akin to Amundsen's precursors or a female cartographer from the Royal Geographical Society defying gender barriers. And the narrative wove onward with subplots of intrigue, a betrayal in Montreal where a double-agent factor attempted artifact theft, thwarted by Graves' deduction from ledger clues, romantic tensions as Fraser proposed marriage, Eleanor hesitating lest it invoke ironic curses, resolving in a private vow under stars that transcended rituals, and historical integrations like links to the California Gold Rush's 49er weddings where Pax Divine Nugget locations, or Australian convict transports where chained brides endured bindings for penal colony prosperities, each thread unraveled through side quests via correspondence, Clara's exposés igniting public outcries in Punch magazines and Harper's Bazaar, fueling feminist stirrings predating suffrage movements, all evoked in simple prose capturing the crunch of snow under boots, the bite of Arctic winds on cheeks, the ethereal hum of auroras syncing with heartbeats, building layers of suspense where every revelation birthed deeper queries. Was Atlantis' fall due to curse overuse, or a bridal rebellion that sank the continent, hooking the soul into Enigma's icy grip, Eleanor's heart anchoring the quest as they turned southward, steaming through equatorial heats toward Cape Horn's treacherous waves, where Patagonian giants of legend might guard coastal relics. The saga expanding into Antarctic mysteries with penguin choruses and glacial crevasses hiding frozen temples, alliances with seal hunters bearing tales of ghostly brides skating on ice floes, and confrontations with the entity, a colossal ice golem animated by Atlantean will, its core a frozen heart pulsing with binding energies, and in epic clashes amid blizzards. Eleanor's amulet sphere hybrid shattering the golem in a cascade of melting revelations, freeing the world's matrimonial spirits to eternal peace, yet whispers persisted of extraterrestrial origins, perhaps meteor-fallen artifacts that inspired Atlantis, hinting at cosmic extensions in future parts, stargazing quests to observatories in Chile or Hawaii where wedding nights under comets activated stellar pacts, blending Victorian astronomy with ancient astrology. Eleanor's Odyssey a testament to one woman's evolution from shrouded bride to unveiled cosmos conqueror, challenging universes of control with love's unbound light. The tale's length immersing in textures, from the tang of salted cod and polar rations to the silk of southern winds on sails, sounds of creaking ice echoing eternal vows, all drawing inexorably toward horizons where intrigue's endless seas met skies of infinite possibility, with no closure but continual unfoldings for the brave heart that dared sail them. Eleanor's anchor holding firm in time's vast ocean of veiled histories and unveiled futures, where every wave carried a secret, every star a story waiting to be wed to the night. Eleanor found herself adrift not just on the physical seas but in the vast ocean of her own reflections as the ironclad ship, christened the Aurora Borealis in honor of their polar triumphs, plowed through the churning waters around Cape Horn, the southernmost tip of South America where the Atlantic and Pacific collided in a perpetual battle of foam and fury. Winds howling like banshees from ancient myths that spoke of shipwrecked brides haunting the rocky shores, their veils tangled in kelp as they lamented unions forged in storm-tossed desperation, and as the vessel pitched and rolled, creaking under the strain of icy gales that carried flakes of snow even in the austral summer, Eleanor clung to the rail with gloved hands numb from the cold, her mind racing back through the labyrinth of adventures that had transformed her from a wide-eyed Victorian bride in a lace gown standing before a foggy London altar to this intrepid explorer wrapped in fur-lined cloaks, her hair whipped by salt-lace breezes, eyes scanning horizons for signs of the Antarctic continent where the final guardian of the Atlantean curse reportedly slumbered in glacial tombs, a colossal entity born from the hubris of a lost civilization that had sought to bind love itself to the chains of power, using wedding nights as portals to harness cosmic energies from falling stars and lunar tides. Energies that Al-Rashid had merely tapped into like a thief siphoning from an eternal well, and now, with the crystalline sphere secured in a velvet-lined chest in her cabin, its surface etched with maps that shifted like living ink under moonlight, revealing new paths to submerged relics off the coasts of Patagonia where indigenous Tehuelche legends whispered of star-fallen gods who demanded bridal sacrifices in exchange for bountiful hunts. Eleanor plotted the next leg of their journey with her steadfast companions gathered around a brass-bound table in the wardroom, lamplight flickering on their faces as Graves puffed on his pipe, exhaling curls of smoke that formed ephemeral shapes resembling intertwined rings symbolizing the matrimonial bonds they fought to free, Agnes meticulously grinding herbs into powders that blended Arctic lichen with South American mate leaves for potions against the creeping madness said to afflict Antarctic explorers. Visions of phantom weddings dancing on the ice where solitude amplified the curse's remnants, Clara typing ceaselessly on her machine, her fingers flying to document the saga for hidden presses that would one day ignite global awakenings among women bound by invisible threads, and Dr. Fraser, his warm gaze meeting Eleanor's across the maps, offering quiet reassurances that their private vows, spoken under the aurora's glow without rituals or rings, would endure beyond any ancient maledictions. A love born from shared perils rather than prescribed proprieties, and as the ship rounded the Horn, dolphins leaping in escort as if bearers of good omens from Neptune's realm, suspense began to weave its threads anew with peculiar incidents aboard, a crewman awakening screaming from dreams of his own wedding night twisted into a nightmare of drowning in bridal veils that turned to seaweed, only calmed by Agnes's elixirs. A sextant malfunctioning to point eternally southward as if pulled by magnetic anomalies from the Guardian's lair, and Eleanor's sphere projecting holographic whispers in forgotten tongues, translated by a Chilean scholar they had recruited in Punta Arenas, A portly man named Diego Ramirez with a mustache like a walrus's tusks and knowledge of Aymara myths that linked Atlantean survivors to Andean peaks where Incan virgins were once wed to the sun god in ceremonies echoing the curse's bindings, sacrifices on golden altars to ensure harvests and empire's longevity. And docking briefly in the Falkland Islands' windswept harbors, where sheep grazed on tussock grass. Under skies perpetually threatening rain, they resupplied with mutton and peat for fires, but intrigue deepened when a local shepherd, eyes wide with tales passed from Scottish settlers, spoke of ghostly lights on the horizon, will-o'-the-wisps of the south that lured ships to reefs, perhaps manifestations of cursed brides from whaling disasters, their unions aboard rolling decks sealed with harpoon blood instead of rings, and Eleanor, sensing the amulet's warmth against her chest, led a small party ashore to investigate a beach wreck from the 1840s, its timbers bleached by sun and salt, hold yielding a rusted chest containing diaries of a captain's wife who had vanished on her wedding voyage, entries detailing visions of ice-bound temples where eternal grooms awaited in frozen splendor, clues aligning with the sphere's maps to point toward the Weddell Sea's treacherous pack ice, where Shackleton's future endurance would echo their current quest in endurance against nature's wrath. And pressing southward, the aurora borealis crunching through floes with its reinforced hull groaning like a living beast, penguins sliding comically on bellies across the white expanse as if oblivious to the human dramas unfolding, the group encountered their first true test, a crevasse opening suddenly beneath the sled during a scouting foray, swallowing supplies and nearly claiming Fraser. Saved only by Graves' quick lasso throw from his detective days in London's fog-shrouded pursuits, and, in the ensuing camp amid tents buffeted by katabatic winds, Eleanor delved deeper into the sphere's lore via trance states induced by Agnes's bruise, visions transporting her to Atlantis's final days, a gleaming city of orichalcum spires where priest-kings officiated mass weddings under comet showers, binding citizen souls to crystalline grids that harness ley-line powers for levitation and longevity. But overreach and controlling free will sparked rebellions led by a bridal oracle who shattered the master sphere, sinking the continent in cataclysmic waves that scattered shards worldwide, each becoming seeds for curses like Al-Rashid's, and awakening from the trance with frost on her lashes, Eleanor shared the revelations, inspiring Clara to weave them into manifestos for the unveiled sisters. Now numbering in the hundreds via clandestine recruitments from suffragette salons in Boston to Zenana gatherings in Calcutta, women exchanging coded brooches shaped like broken chains to symbolize their cause, and as the ship anchored off an ice shelf cracking with thunderous reports, they deployed dog teams and skiffs to penetrate the interior, auroras here twisted into southern lights that painted the sky in veils of emerald and violet, guiding them to a glacial cave where bioluminescent fungi illuminated murals of Atlantean refugees fleeing to Antarctic refuges, establishing hidden outposts guarded by ice elementals born from the curse's backlash, and confrontation loomed. As the Guardian stirred, a towering golem of animated ice and crystal, its form shifting like a bride's gown in wind, eyes glowing with the cold fire of millennia-old resentments, roaring challenges in a language of cracking glaciers that the sphere translated as demands for a new binding, offering power over empires in exchange for Eleanor's soul wed to its eternal loneliness, but she refused. Rallying her companions in a symphony of defiance, Graves firing explosive charges to fracture its limbs, Agnes hurling vials that melted ice with alchemical heat, Clara shouting incantations from the ledger's pages amplified by her voice's passion, Fraser wielding a medical lance modified into an energy conductor, and Eleanor, at the heart of the maelstrom, merging her amulet with the golem's core in a ritual of forgiveness, channeling the bridal oracle's ancient rebellion to transmute the guardian's rage into dissolution, the entity crumbling into harmless snowflakes that swirled in a vortex of release, freeing trapped spirits of polar explorers' wives who had perished in cursed expeditions, their ethereal thanks manifesting as warm breezes amid the freeze. But victory unveiled deeper layers, the golem's demise revealing a subterranean chamber with a star map etched in crystal, pointing to meteor craters worldwide where Atlantean meteors had fallen, embedding cosmic pacts that influenced historical turning points like the Tunguska event's precursors or the Chicxulub impact's dinosaur-ending echoes, suggesting the curses extended to extraterrestrial origins, meteors carrying binding crystals from distant worlds where alien civilizations had fallen to similar hubris, and Eleanor, shivering yet exhilarated in Fraser's protective arms as they retreated to the ship, pondered this cosmic expansion, her quest evolving from earthly wedding nights to stellar enigmas, alliances forming with astronomers in Greenwich observatories tracking comets that aligned with historical weddings of note, like Queen Victoria's own union potentially shadowed by subtle influences explaining her prolonged mourning as a curse's grip, and subplots blossomed like Antarctic lichens in rare thaws. A betrayal among the crew, a steward revealed as a cult remnant from Astor's network. Subdued and redeemed through Eleanor's empathetic interrogations that uncovered his own forced marriage's tragedies. Romantic deepenings as Fraser and Eleanor exchanged vows in a private ceremony on the ice, witnessed by Auroras and companions, a union free of veils or vows beyond mutual choice, symbolizing the saga's core theme. And historical integrations with Darwin's Beagle voyages revisited through logs hinting at Galapagos weddings among crew that birthed evolutionary insights twisted by visions, or Magellan's circumnavigation plagued by pact-induced mutinies off Patagonian coasts, each detail enriching the narrative with scents of ozone from lightning-split skies, tastes of pemmican rations laced with hope, sounds of ice calving like bridal bells tolling fate, building suspense where every revelation peeled back cosmic veils. Hooking deeper into the enigma of existence where wedding nights were microcosms of universal bindings, forces that held stars in orbits and hearts in thrall. Eleanor's resolve forging onward to meteor hunts in Siberian taiga where shamans wed spirits under boreal forests, or Australian outback craters where aboriginal dreamtime marriages intersected with fallen skyrocks, the tale's expanse mirroring the universe's infinity, layers upon layers of intrigue and simple words evoking vivid worlds, from the crunch of Antarctic snow to the whisper of cosmic winds, all drawing the brave into horizons where secrets wed stories under eternal nights. Promising no finite end but perpetual unfoldings in the grand odyssey of light against shadowed vows, with Eleanor's heart the unwavering anchor guiding through time's boundless seas to realms where every particle carried a pact, every galaxy a groom awaiting its bridal dawn. She awoke from a fitful slumber in her cabin aboard the Aurora Borealis as it steamed northward from the Antarctic wastes, the ship's engines humming a steady rhythm that echoed the pulse of the universe's hidden bindings. Her dreams haunted by swirling nebulae where stellar weddings unfolded in explosions of supernovae, binding black holes to neutron stars in eternal unions that warp spacetime itself, suggesting that the Atlantean curses were not merely earthly or even planetary but echoes of cosmic rituals predating the Big Bang. Rituals where primordial entities had forged the laws of physics through matrimonial pacts that ensured the balance of matter and antimatter, light and dark, creation and destruction. And now, with the crystalline sphere's fragments reassembled into a pulsating orb that levitated slightly above her palm, emitting a soft glow that cast ethereal patterns on the bulkhead walls like star charts from forgotten constellations, Eleanor gathered her companions in the chart room, where maps of the heavens overlaid terrestrial ones. Graves adjusting his spectacles to peer at astronomical almanacs procured from a Buenos Aires observatory during their resupply, his detective mind piecing together clues from meteorite impacts recorded in Victorian journals, events like the 1833 Leonid storm that had inspired poets and prophets alike, perhaps veiling activations of interstellar pacts that influenced earthly weddings below, Agnes stirring a cauldron of cosmic-infused teas blended from meteor dust collected in Siberian craters and Antarctic ice cores, potions that heighten astral projections to scout ahead into the void, Clara hammering away at her typewriter to encode missives for the unveiled sisters now extending their network to amateur astronomers in rural England and shamanic stargazers in the Andes, women who gazed upward to unravel the veils of night where bridal stars twinkled with secrets of universal subjugation, and Dr. Fraser, his hand steady on her shoulder in a touch that grounded her amid the infinite, suggesting modifications to the ship's rigging for potential aerial ascents using hot air balloon attachments, inspired by Montgolfier brothers' experiments, envisioning lifts into the upper atmosphere where thinner air might allow communion with meteor trails that carried the original Atlantean meteor's essences, and as the vessel plowed through equatorial calms, dolphins again leaping in playful arcs as if messengers from Poseidon bridging sea to sky, suspense began to unfurl like a comet's tail with anomalous occurrences. Navigation instruments spinning wildly toward Polaris as if pulled by invisible tethers. Crew members reporting dreams of their own weddings morphing into galactic ceremonies where vows echoed across light years, binding souls to distant quasars, and the orb projecting visions of an impending meteor shower, the Perseides radiant aligning with historical wedding dates like that of Napoleon and Josephine, whose union might have been influenced by cosmic bindings explaining his meteoric rise and fall. A revelation that sent Clara scrambling to cross-reference with French archives. Smuggled aboard, and docking in Rio de Janeiro's vibrant harbor amid the samba rhythm's precursor and carnival colors that veiled deeper mysteries of candomblé rituals where orishes wed mortals and trance dances echoing the curse's portals, they enlisted a local astrophysicist, Senora Isabella Vargas, a fiery woman with hair like midnight cascades and eyes sparkling with stellar knowledge, who had studied under Jesuit priests blending Copernican theories with indigenous Tupi cosmologies. Her tales around a beachside fire of how Atlantean meteors had struck Brazilian highlands, embedding crystals that local shamans used in marriage rites to bind tribes to star spirits for fertile lands and victorious hunts, but twisted by Portuguese colonizers into pacts for gold rushes and slave trades, where enslaved African brides endured wedding nights infused with meteor magic to prophesy mine locations. A horror that fueled Eleanor's resolve to integrate these shards into the orb, and, venturing into the Amazon's steamy depths by riverboat chugging against currents teeming with piranhas and anacondas, the canopy overhead a green veil filtering sunlight into dappled mysteries, they navigated to a crater lake sacred to the Yanomami, where waterfalls cascaded like bridal trains over mossy rocks, and under a canopy of vines entwined like lovers' arms, they performed a ritual merging the local crystal, a geode pulsing with inner auroras, with the orb, awakening guardians not of ice but of jungle spirits, spectral jaguars with eyes like emeralds prowling the undergrowth, their roars blending with thunderclaps from sudden squalls, and fierce encounters ensued, Graves wielding a machete etched with protective runes, Agnes scattering pollens that induced hallucinogenic distractions, Clara documenting with sketches that captured the beast's fluid forms, Fraser injecting antidotes against venomous bites from hidden vipers allied to the guardians, and Eleanor, channeling the orb's growing power, communed with the spirits, offering tales of liberation from across the globe, convincing them to yield as allies rather than adversaries, their essences infusing the orb with tropical vitality that expanded its scope to interstellar scales, revealing maps of meteor trails leading to observatories in the Chilean Atacama where dry skies unveiled the Milky Way's bridal veils, and pressing southward again, the aurora borealis skirting Patagonian fjords where glaciers calved into turquoise waters like diamonds from a cosmic jeweler, they ascended Andean peaks by mule train, breast short in rarefied air, to reach Incan ruin atop a sacred waka, where astronomers of old had wed the sun and moon in solstice ceremonies, and Senora Vargas translated quipu knots, knotted strings recording celestial events that aligned with meteor falls coinciding with historical weddings like Montezuma's unions before Cortez's conquest, pacts that bound empires to falling stars for prophetic might, but corrupted into tools of domination, and in a high-altitude ritual under star-strewn skies where the Southern Cross pointed like a compass to infinity, they integrated another shard, a obsidian mirror reflecting not faces but galaxies where bridal nebulae birthed stars and explosive vows, but awakening aerial guardians, condor spirits with wings spanning horizons, their cries piercing the thin air. And aerial battles unfolded, the group deploying balloon kites rigged with nets and harpoons, Graves calculating trajectories like a Scotland Yard marksman, Agnes brewing windswept incense to calm the beasts, Clara rallying local Aymara guides with impassioned pleas, Fraser tending altitude sickness with oxygen masks improvised from bladders, and Eleanor soaring in a harness tethered to the orb's levitation, whispering empathic bonds that transformed the condors into escorts guiding them to the next node, a meteor crater in the Australian outback where the ship would sail next via Pacific crossings, waves undulating like the curves of bridal gowns under trade winds, and en route through Polynesian islands where palm fronds rustled secrets of navigator weddings binding canoes to star paths for voyages across vast oceans, they collected coral-infused crystals from Hawaiian volcanoes, rituals under Kilauea's glow where Pele the fire goddess wed mortals and lava-forged unions for fertile lands, merging with the orb in ceremonies blending hula dances with Victorian propriety, suspense heightening with shark guardians circling lagoons, their fins slicing water like daggers at a wedding feast gone awry. And victorious integrations expanded the orb's visions to reveal the ultimate cosmic hub, a nebula in Orion where Atlantean refugees had fled post-cataclysm, establishing ethereal outposts that broadcast binding signals via pulsars, influencing earthly pacts through quantum entanglements that made every wedding night an echo of galactic marriages, and arriving in Sydney's harbor amid convict-built sandstone and eucalyptus scents, they ventured into the red dust of the interior by camel caravan. Dreamtime paths leading to Ulleru's monolithic shadow where Aboriginal elders shared songlines of star ancestors. Wedding earth spirits in corroborate dances, pacts for seasonal rains and kangaroo abundances, but twisted by colonial squatters into bindings for sheep stations and gold digs, where mail-order brides from England endured wedding nights under southern skies infused with meteor magic to divine water sources and droughts, and at the crater's rim, ringed by Spinifex grass-whispering winds, they unearthed a red ochre crystal vibrating with ancient harmonics, its merger awakening didgeridoo echoing. Guardians, serpent rainbow spirits coiling from the earth like living rainbows, and terrestrial tussles ensued, Graves dodging venomous strikes with detective agility, Agnes countering with eucalyptus smokes that pacified, Clara capturing oral histories from elders for her chronicles, Fraser healing bites with antivenoms brewed from local flora, and Eleanor harmonizing with the orb's song. Weaving Victorian hymns with indigenous chants to ally the serpents, their wisdom infusing the orb with Antipodean balance, revealing interstellar routes to observatories in South Africa where bore weddings under the Magellanic clouds hid pacts for diamond prophecies. But the saga deepened with betrayals, a rival explorer funded by residual cultists attempting orb theft in the outback, thwarted by the group's unity and elder alliances, romantic blossoms as Fraser and Eleanor shared a desert night under meteor showers, vows renewed in whispers that bound hearts without curses, and historical tapestries woven with tales of Captain Cook's voyages where crew weddings on Tahitian shores activated pacts for navigational stars, or Burke and Will's expeditions plagued by curse-induced mirages leading to demise, each layer peeling cosmic veils where suspense mounted like building thunderheads, the orb now a beacon pulsing with global shards, guiding to Siberian meteor sites where shamans wed tundra spirits for reindeer herds. Voyages northward through Asian seas fraught with typhoons that tested hulls and resolves, alliances with Mongolian nomads whose yurt weddings bound to eagle totems for vast steppes conquests, integrations amid Gobi dunes where sand guardians rose and whirling dervishes, battles won through empathetic rituals that freed bound souls across timelines, from prehistoric cave weddings where fire-bound clans to survival pacts, to future visions of space colony unions under Martian domes echoing the same bindings, Eleanor's odyssey transcending eras as the orb granted temporal glimpses, revealing how Victorian propriety masked universal truths of control through love's veils, and culminating in a Himalayan peak observatory where Tibetan lamas wed enlightenment to star mandalas, the final earthly shard merging to propel astral projection into the Orion Nebula, ethereal journeys where companion spirits linked in a chain of light, confronting the Atlantean exiles. Luminous beings in nebular gowns offering pacts for godlike powers, but Eleanor, anchored by her heart's true vows, shattered their core with orb's unified force, waves of liberation rippling back through space-time, freeing galaxies from binding orbits that stifled evolution, stars dancing in joyous freedom, earthly weddings transformed into pure celebrations devoid of shadows, yet whispers of multiversal origins lingered, meteors from parallel dimensions carrying variant curses, hinting at interdimensional quests and sequels, Eleanor's legacy a cosmos of empowered unions. Her story in simple words evoking vast expanses, from the roar of Antarctic blizzards to the silence of stellar voids, scents of jungle blooms to tastes of polar rations, sounds of galactic pulses syncing with heartbeats, all hooking into infinite intrigue where every particle's pact dissolved into bridal dawns of unbound possibility, no end but eternal horizons for brave souls sailing time seas with hearts as anchors.